police say that 21-year-old Keon King turned himself in here to police headquarters last night.
What if I told you that a young woman reported being harassed, that her harasser had already kidnapped and strangled another woman just months before, that the justice system let him walk free, and that woman is now dead? What if I told you that everything that happened to 23-year-old Kada Scott could have been prevented if just one part of our system had worked the way it was supposed to? This isn't just a story about a murder. This is a story about failure at every level, and it's a story that should make every single one of us furious. Before we get into this, if you're new to One Crime at a Time, hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell icon because cases like this need to be heard. They need to be talked about, and they need to make us demand better. Let me take you back to the beginning, to October 4th, 2025. It's a Friday night in Philadelphia. Most people are winding down, getting ready for the weekend, maybe making plans with friends. But for Kada Scott, a hardworking 23-year-old woman, Friday night means something different. It means going to her overnight shift at a nursing home called the Terrace at Chestnut Hill. Now, I want you to really picture Kata for a moment. She's 23. She's got her whole life stretching out in front of her. She's the kind of person who shows up for her shifts, who takes care of elderly patients during the lonely overnight hours when most people are sleeping. She's responsible. She's dependable. She's someone's daughter. She's someone who matters. That night, around 9:45 p.m., Kata leaves her home. She says goodnight to her family, just like she's done countless times before. She gets in her car, drives to work, and arrives at the nursing home. Everything seems completely normal. This is her routine. This is just another shift. Except it's not, because Kada Scott never finishes her shift that night. Somewhere between walking into that building and the hours that followed, Kata vanishes. When morning comes and Kata doesn't come home, her family knows immediately that something is terribly wrong. Kata isn't the type to just disappear. She doesn't leave without telling anyone. She's reliable, remember? So her family does what any terrified family would do. They call the police. They report her missing. And that's when a timeline starts to emerge that will make your blood run cold. First thing investigators notice? Kata's car is still sitting in the parking lot of the nursing home. Still there. Let that sink in. If her car is there, she didn't drive away. So how did she leave? Who did she leave with? And more importantly, why would she leave in the middle of her shift without her vehicle? But then investigators dig deeper, and they find something that changes everything. In the days and weeks leading up to her disappearance, Kata had been complaining about someone harassing her. Someone wouldn't leave her alone. Someone was contacting her through her phone, making her uncomfortable, crossing boundaries that should never be crossed. And Kata had told people about it. She had expressed that this person's behavior was becoming a real problem. Think about what that means. Kata knew she was in danger. She felt it. She said it out loud. And she still ended up dead. Remember that as we go through this story, because it's going to become really important. Investigators start going through Kata's phone records, her messages, her social media. And one name keeps appearing over and over again. 21-year-old Keon King. According to what police discovered, Keon King was the last person in contact with Kada Scott. Not just on the night she disappeared, but in all the time leading up to it. He was the one harassing her. He was the one she was afraid of. And here's where the timeline gets absolutely chilling. Evidence showed that very shortly after Kata left the nursing home that night, she appeared to meet with Keon King. She goes to work. She's inside that building. And then within a short window of time, she's gone and she's with the person who had been harassing her. What happened in those moments? Was she threatened? Did he say something to lure her out? Did he threaten someone else? Did she think she could handle the situation, and it spiraled into something she couldn't control? These are the questions that haunt me about this case. The moments we can't see. The words we didn't hear. The decisions made under pressure that we'll never fully understand. As days pass, Kata's family is desperate. They're putting up flyers all over Philadelphia. They're posting on social media. They're begging anyone who knows anything to come forward. The police treat this as a critical missing person case because they know every hour that passes makes the chances of finding Kata alive smaller and smaller. And all eyes are on Keon King. On October 10th, 6 days after Kata disappeared, Keon King is arrested. He's charged with kidnapping. The Philadelphia Police Department and the FBI are working together on this because they believe Keon King knows exactly what happened to Kada Scott. But here's what makes this even more agonizing for her family. Even with Keon King in custody, even with him being charged, Kata is still missing. Nobody knows where she is. Her family still doesn't have answers. And that's the special kind of torture that comes with cases like this, isn't it? Something horrible has happened. You know who did it. But without finding the victim, without having those answers, families are stuck in this nightmare space between hope and despair. They can't move forward. They can't grieve properly. They're just frozen, waiting for news they're terrified to receive. For 2 long weeks, the search continues. Volunteers comb through neighborhoods. Police follow every possible lead. Divers search bodies of water. Investigators are working around the clock. And Kata's family is holding on to whatever thin thread of hope they can grasp, even though deep down, as more days pass, they know the chances of a happy ending are slipping away. Then comes October 18th. A discovery is made in a wooded area behind an abandoned middle school, near a place called the Aubrey Arboretum in Philadelphia. Human remains, hidden in a shallow grave, buried in a spot where someone hoped they would never, ever be found. The remains are believed to be Kada Scott. And just hours ago, that belief became a confirmed fact. DNA testing came back with results that shatter any remaining hope Kata's family might have been clinging to. The DNA showed a 99.9% match to samples collected from Kata's parents. It's her. The remains found in that shallow grave are Kada Scott. Let me tell you what else they found at that scene, because these details matter. Police recovered Kata's debit card, her phone case, her iPad case, her glasses, the small, personal items that belonged to a 23-year-old woman who was just trying to live her life. Items that ended up scattered in the woods because someone decided that his wants were more important than her existence. After 2 weeks of searching, after 2 weeks of her family praying for a miracle, this is how Kata's story ends.
Right now, we're outside the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's office where they have been working to identify that body that was found yesterday. And tonight, our NBC 10 investigators have learned through their sources that body was Kada Scott.
Not with her walking through her front door. Not with her being found safe somewhere. But with the worst possible outcome that any family can face. Kada Scott is gone. And Keon King is responsible. Now, prosecutors have confirmed that additional charges are coming for Keon King this week. He's currently being held on $2.5 million bail, and you can bet those charges are going to include murder. The evidence is there. The timeline is there. The DNA confirmation is there. Keon King took Kada Scott's life, and he's going to face justice for it in court. But here's where this case goes from tragic to absolutely enraging. And I need you to really hear what I'm about to tell you, because this is the part that should make every single person watching this video furious at a system that failed Kada Scott long before October 4th. Earlier this year, just months before Kata disappeared, Keon King was charged with kidnapping and assaulting another woman. Not just assaulting her, strangling her. Think about that. This wasn't his first time. There was another woman, another victim who went through a terrifying, violent ordeal at the hands of this same man. That case should have kept Keon King off the streets. That case should have meant he couldn't hurt anyone else. But you want to know what happened? The victim and a key witness failed to appear in court, and the case was dropped.
Kidnapping. That case had been withdrawn by our office based on the witness failing to appear at court. I pulled that file, and after an extensive review of it, our office made the decision to refile those charges.
Now that case is being refiled, but it's too late. It's too late for Kata. But wait, it gets worse. In November 2024, less than a year before Kata disappeared, Keon King was also charged in another incident involving the same woman. He allegedly broke into her home, forced her onto a bed, and choked her. Again, another violent incident. Another warning sign flashing bright red that this man was dangerous. So let me make sure we're all clear on what happened here. Keon King had a documented history of violence against women. He had been charged with kidnapping. He had been charged with strangulation. He had been charged with breaking into someone's home and attacking them. The system knew he was dangerous, and he was still free to harass Kada Scott, free to lure her away from her workplace, free to kill her and bury her body in the woods. How does that happen? How does someone with that kind of violent history just walk around freely until they finally kill someone? And more importantly, how many Kada Scotts have to die before we fix this broken system? This is what keeps me up at night about cases like this. It's not just the tragedy of what happened. It's the fact that it didn't have to happen. Every single piece was there to prevent this. Keon King had shown exactly who he was. He had demonstrated his capacity for violence. He had proven he was a threat to women. And the system let him go anyway. Think about that first victim for a moment. The woman he kidnapped and strangled earlier this year. She went through something traumatic. She reported it. Charges were filed. And then she didn't show up to court. Now, we don't know why she didn't show up. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was threatened. Maybe she couldn't face him again. Maybe she just wanted to move on and forget the whole nightmare. Whatever the reason, the system should have had a backup plan. The system should have recognized that victims of violent crimes, especially strangulation, are at high risk and need extra support and protection. But instead, the case just disappeared. And so did the accountability for Keon King. And then another woman paid the price with her life. Now, as this case moves forward through the legal system, Keon King will face his additional charges. There will be a trial. Evidence will be presented. And hopefully, justice will be served in the courtroom. But that's cold comfort for Kata's family, isn't it? Justice in a courtroom doesn't bring her back. It doesn't undo the 2 weeks they spent in agony not knowing where she was. It doesn't erase the moment they got the news that their daughter's remains had been found in a shallow grave in the woods. Nothing can give them back what was taken. Nothing can give Kata back all the moments she should have had. Her 24th birthday. Her 25th. Her wedding day. Her children. Her career. Growing old. All of it gone. Stolen by someone who had already shown he was a danger and was allowed to remain free anyway. And here's what really gets me. Kata did everything right. She reported the harassment. She told people someone was bothering her. She expressed that his behavior was making her uncomfortable. She didn't ignore the warning signs. She didn't minimize what was happening. She spoke up, and it still wasn't enough to save her. When Kata made it clear she wasn't interested in him, when she told him to leave her alone, what made him continue? What turned rejection into harassment and harassment into murder? These are questions that psychologists and criminologists spend careers studying. But they're also questions we need to grapple with as regular people trying to understand how to prevent tragedies like this. There's something called the lethality assessment that law enforcement and domestic violence advocates use to determine how dangerous a situation really is. It includes questions about things like, has the abuser ever strangled you? Has the violence escalated? Do you believe they're capable of killing you? And strangulation is at the top of that list for a reason. Because it's one of the clearest indicators that someone has crossed the threshold from abuse to potentially lethal violence. Keon King strangled someone. That box was checked. That alarm should have been ringing. And somehow he was still free to kill Kada Scott. The timeline of Kata's final hours is something that investigators are still piecing together. They're examining forensic evidence. They're tracking phone records and surveillance footage. They're trying to reconstruct exactly what happened from the moment Kata left that nursing home to when she ended up in that grave. The district attorney's office has said they'll release more information in the coming days as the investigation continues. For Kata's family, the confirmation that those remains belong to their daughter is devastating beyond words. For 2 weeks, they existed in this horrible space of not knowing, where hope and despair battled each other every minute of every day. And now they have their answer. And it's the answer they feared most. We need to believe women when they say they're in danger. We need to believe them when they say someone is making them uncomfortable. We need to stop minimizing and questioning and dismissing. Because every single time we don't believe someone, every time we tell them they're overreacting, we're rolling the dice with their life. Let me ask you some questions, and I really want you to think about these. How many warning signs do we ignore in our own lives? How many times do we hear about someone's behavior and think it's not our problem? How many times do we see harassment happening and decide not to get involved? And what's the cost of that silence? Here's another question. What could you have done if you were in Keon King's life? If you were his friend, his family member, his coworker? If you knew he had been charged with kidnapping and strangling someone? Would you have said something? Would you have confronted him? Would you have made sure he wasn't around vulnerable people? Or would you have looked the other way? And here's the hardest question of all. If you were in the system, if you were a prosecutor or a judge or a victim advocate, and you saw that strangulation case get dropped, would you have fought harder? Would you have found a way to move forward without the victim? Would you have flagged Keon King as someone who needed to be monitored closely? Or would you have just moved on to the next case on your desk? These aren't comfortable questions. They're not meant to be. Because Kada Scott is dead, and we all have some responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen again. The investigation into Kata's murder is ongoing. More details will come out. More evidence will be presented. The trial will happen, and we'll learn more about what exactly happened in those final hours. But we already know the most important thing. We already know that this was preventable. We already know that the system had chances to stop Keon King and didn't take them. And we already know that a young woman paid for those failures with her life. Remember her name. Remember her story. And demand better. Demand that strangulation cases are taken seriously. Demand that victims get the support they need. Demand that people with violent histories don't get chance after chance to hurt more people. Demand that when someone says they're being harassed, we believe them and help them. Because the next Kada Scott is out there right now. The next woman being harassed by someone with a violent history. The next victim waiting to see if the system will protect her or fail her. And what happens to her depends on whether we learn from this tragedy or just move on to the next true crime story. So here's what I want you to do. Share this video. Talk about Kata's case. Let people know what happened and why it matters. Hold your local prosecutors and judges accountable for how they handle violent crimes. Support organizations that help victims of domestic violence and assault. And if you see something, if you hear about someone being harassed or hurt, say something. Do something. Don't wait until it's too late. Leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts on this case. Tell me what you think needs to change. And if you got something out of this video, hit that like button and subscribe to One Crime at a Time. Because we're not just here to tell stories. We're here to make sure these stories lead to change. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, Kada Scott deserved better. We all need to be better.